and welcome to Trusty Chords, the podcast which aims to celebrate music and those that create it. Cast your mind back to the early to mid-thousands and it was pretty hard to escape Epicure. That is, if you were listening to Triple J, the Ballarat outfit were a hot commodity. Having formed in the mid-90s, a few formative releases gave way to a bit of a personnel shuffle and something of a musical refocusing. What came next was the sort of thing that most bands of the era could only dream of. Slick support slots, constant airplay, and even placings in the annual Hottest 100 countdown made Epicure's name one that a lot of fans were quite familiar with, while albums such as The Goodbye Girl and Main Street were mainstays of those same fans' CD players. By 2010, however, it was clear that things were reaching an end, and after the fittingly titled Quietly Into the Night tour, the band found themselves no longer a going concern. Members still made music, of course, including Juan Alban, who released a string of solo records in the coming 15 years. However, many fans of the band, and I include myself in that list, were not expecting to receive word that 2026 was bringing with it a new record from the group. Dubbed Evenings in Honduras, it's a wonderful piece of work which feels like a perfect continuation of what the band had delivered all those years ago, and also serves as a perfect example of a reunion done right. My excitement for this new record led to me giving Juan a call to chat about this new record, how it came together, and what fans can expect going forward. Anyway, have a listen to Epicure's Evenings in Honduras, buy a ticket to their upcoming tour, have a listen to our chat, and I'll see you at the end of the episode for some general housekeeping. Juan Alban, thank you very much for joining this episode of the Trusty Chords podcast.
My pleasure, mate. Thanks for having me.
So for those who might not recognise your name, could you give me a few words to introduce yourself and tell me why we're chatting today, if that's not too existential?
No, sure. My name's Juan Alban, and I'm in a band called Epicure. We've just kind of reformed after, 16 years of not being a band, and just recorded a new record, and it's coming out at the end of next week.
Nice and succinct. But I guess before we get on to, contemporary matters about new records and reunions and whatnot, what I love to do at the start of these podcasts is go back in time a bit to where a love of music first formed. So do you have any recollections of when music first resonated with you?
Yeah. My parents were fairly musical, so my dad played in bands when he was young, and my mum was a music teacher, so I have very early memories of my dad playing like John Denver songs to me on his guitar. Like I remember Take Me Home Country Roads kind of thing, like as being a very early memory. And yeah, I wouldn't say they had like, super, what's the word? Like, not really edgy taste or anything, it was like whatever was kind of popular would have been, the Beatles or Simon and Garfunkel or, John Denver or that kind of thing. But not those are obviously all amazing artists, but they weren't, they were, I guess, mainstream popular, acts. And that's, I guess, my first intro into that. And I guess from a very young age, I just kind of liked singing and, there was always music in the house. Mum played piano and that kind of thing. And dad played bass. So, yeah.
Yeah. So was there ever a particular moment where you just basically said, hey, you know what, I'm doing a bit of singing, there's music in the house. I want to get involved in this musical thing. Like, was that ever something that, you thought of?
I guess my mum was like, I had piano lessons very young because my mum played piano and was a classically trained pianist. And I really kind of fought that tooth and nail. I didn't take to it. Like I could sort of get by on a little bit of natural talent I had, but I never practiced or anything. I'd be like in tears going to my piano lessons as a kid. And it wasn't really until I kind of picked up a guitar, probably sort of 14 or 15, that I really sort of started enjoying music. But like I sang in choirs as a kid, and my early memories of just loving kind of pop music, whatever was on the charts. I think the first record I ever bought was Different Light by the Bangles. Would have been like 86. So I remember like very early on I loved music.
I mean, that's also a pretty solid record as well, actually.
Amazing record. Yeah, I just revisited that recently.
Yeah, I always feel like the Bangles are one of those bands that sort of don't get as much love as they deserve because they're sort of like seen as like that bit of a throwaway pop sort of thing, but
Yeah.
Great musicians. So obviously you're growing up in like a musical household. Now, obviously Epicure are from Ballarat. Were you born in Ballarat?
No, so my family came from the west. They grew up in a little town called Manjimup in WA. And my dad was a farmer and my mum was a teacher. And when I was about, I'm trying to think, like 1.5 or 2, they moved over to a farm in New South Wales, and then we moved down to a farm in Victoria when I was about like 3, and then from there we moved to Ballarat when I was about 6 or 7. So most of my schooling was in Ballarat, but we weren't from here originally. Yeah.
But I guess that also it works as a nice way for me to ask the question. Like you're obviously not sort of coming up in these thriving musical metropolises or metropoli. I don't know what the plural is. Probably metropolises. But are you ever sort of looking out there and sort of being like, hey, I really want to sort of be involved in music more. I wish there was more of a scene happening. I mean, what was like the Ballarat scene like for you as you were sort of coming up into that age of wanting to be involved in music?
Yeah, well, I mean, actually, there has been a pretty thriving, um, there's a very thriving creative community in Ballarat, full stop. But there was a venue in Ballarat, and it had been a couple of venues, the Camp Hotel and the Bridge Mall Inn, who were hosting original music in the sort of early to mid 90s. And I guess we started sort of playing in an early version of this band when I was sort of probably 16 or so. And our very first gigs were there, were at the Bridge Mall Inn, which is in Ballarat. It's a very legendary live music venue. So actually, Ballarat actually has had a long history of original music and music in general. But um, I guess I met some of the guys just from school, and very quickly, like those first gigs we did at the Bridge Mall Inn, I just kind of thought, oh, this is what I want to do. It was a bit of an awakening. So I was kind of lucky in a lot of ways. Not being like as you said in a city. If you weren't going to be in a city, Ballarat was a pretty good place to sort of still want to play music.
Yeah, because I mean, I personally grew up in well, north of Adelaide, and you
Yeah,
sort of
right.
like hearing about places like Ballarat, where I was like, okay, it's not it's out of Melbourne basically
Mm.
to put it
Yeah, it's
simply,
still a big country
but
town. So yeah,
but yeah, it's one of those things where it's like you always hear about great artists coming from there. I mean, the one that always comes to mind for me is Dead Salesman, for example, like wonderful
huge
band.
band for us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can imagine, and it's one of those sort of things where it's just sort of like you always sort of wonder how bands would sort of or just artists in general would flourish and come into their own if they were in a different environment. And
Mm.
that's always been sort of one thing I've always really liked about Epicure and your music is that it doesn't have that sort of this is almost going to sound somewhat pejorative. It doesn't have that big city mentality about it, which I've
Yeah,
always
right.
I've always really enjoyed. But
Yeah, cool.
I feel like I'm putting the cart before the horse here a bit because I should actually be asking, how did the Epicure story actually begin? Because you sort of mentioned before you were about what 16 or so.
Yeah, so the first Epicure's had a few, iterations, different lineups, but the original lineup we all just went to high school together. That was myself. Well, not all of us actually. Dom Santa Maria, our drummer, went to a different school, but he was a friend with our guitarist Luke Can. So four of us went to the same school. We were friends at the school, and we started playing music in an early kind of version of the band. Um, and I'm trying to think. We didn't, like that early version of the band did a record called Fold, which was our first album. I think came out in '99 or 2000. But we probably played, around for 3 or 4 years just on the local scene, being terrible, obviously not being very good. But by the time we sort of started recording the songs for Fold in our early 20s, and I feel like our songwriting had kind of improved enough that we got a little bit of attention from Triple J and that kind of thing, and we did a
Yeah.
couple of tours. And but yeah, having venues in Ballarat to really cut your teeth and see, good bands already touring. Like you mentioned, the Dead Salesman, that was a huge thing for us to see a band that good in our hometown playing shows. I was like deeply enthralled to everything that everyone else was, like all the alternative music scene of Smashing Pumpkins and Soundgarden and stuff. But for me, hearing the Dead Salesman, they were as good as those bands. The songs were as good, and they were in our hometown. So
Mm.
they've always been role models for us. So I guess that's kind of how it started. Yeah.
Now, I had actually never gone onto the Epicure Wikipedia page before today, but
Mm.
I should ask, have you looked at it before?
Well, no. Well, I looked at it a little while ago and it was wildly inaccurate. And then I thought I checked it out again not long ago and I thought it was okay. So I don't know if it's still.
Because I was going to say one thing I was reading on there, and I said I thought I have to ask you this. Can you confirm this line for me? Epicure played their first gig at the Dunstown Football Club and were booed off stage. I was booed off stage in favour of Cold Chisel.
Well, Cultures weren't there, but that was our first gig. And I think there was like a Cold Chisel, maybe a tribute band there or something. But our first gig was there. We were 16 years old.
Yeah.
We got paid $250. And yeah, we were booed off stage, and there was someone there who got up and replaced us. Yeah.
Right, because all I was thinking of, because a little while ago I might have mentioned on this podcast about how like I think one of Bon Jovi's very first gigs was playing at Madison Square Garden in support of ZZ Top, like within their
Yeah.
very first year. And there's
Yeah.
me thinking like, I don't think this doesn't sound right. I don't think Cold Chisel were on the same lineup,
They
but
were not.
but
No.
obviously I didn't want to sort of start casting aspersions just in case you guys were burning very bright very quickly.
Definitely
Um,
not. No.
but in those early days, like, did you have a particular vision, I guess, of what you wanted the group to sound like or look like? Because obviously the sound and the makeup sort of it ebbs and flows over time.
Yeah, I mean, I think really early on we were just copying the things that we kind of liked at the time, and it was, all those old rock bands from the States, I guess. Um, and it changed with the band members. So in the early lineup of the band, our guitarist Michael Brown was, a really great guitarist and a bit ahead of the rest of us. Honestly, he was writing quite good kind of riffs and that kind of thing. And I was writing the lyrics even from an early age, but terrible, doing very poorly. And then the dynamic shifted a little bit when I started sort of playing. I picked up guitar and started writing songs as well. So the Fold record is kind of half songs that I'd written on guitar and vocals, and half where Michael had written the music and I'd kind of written the lyrics. But I guess what I'm getting at is the five members. We had some bands we were all into, but also very different tastes. So myself and Michael had some stuff we were both into, but stuff that we both weren't really into in common. So, and that version of the band kind of had some success, then more or less broke up. And then when we reformed, it was with new members, except for myself and Dom and Tim, who are still in the band now and are the original members. But at that stage, I guess I'd sort of taken over more as the primary singer-songwriter, and it was a little more based around, I guess, my songs and what was influencing me, although clearly with strong influences from the new members of the band as well.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, because guitarist Dan Houlihan joined at that time, and Dan and I, like Dan introduced me. He was like a kind of a big brother figure to me. He really introduced me to a lot of real cool Americana stuff that was sort of popping off at the time, and stuff like that I hadn't listened to, like Neil Young and the Allman Brothers, and that kind of stuff. So definitely had an influence of the sound, but it started being based around my songwriting at that point, I guess.
Because I think it was around like the early to mid thousands that the band sort of, I guess, catches fire, for lack of a better word, and finds a strong
Yeah,
audience, mainly to the likes of Triple J. Like, how
yep,
was that sort of feeling for you guys? Because I mean, obviously you're still quite young around that time, and to have a lot of attention. And I also feel like for a lot of fans of the band as well, Epicure almost feel like one of those groups which almost sort of like it serves them better if it's a bit of a well kept secret. And suddenly, all of Australia is hearing, like all your songs. But how was that feeling for you? I mean, it must have been sort of somewhat gratifying to have an audience.
yeah. Well, it seems so improbable because we'd been a band for 5 years or so, and even then we'd had a couple of songs get rotation on Triple J, and that was a big deal for a 20-year-olds. Um, but 2 or 3 years earlier, like Triple J Unearthed had come to Ballarat, and you'd submit demo tapes, and we'd submitted something, and obviously didn't win because it was awful. It was awful music. So in that very short time, we started to learn how to write songs, and we'd been playing to, apart from those support shows, basically when that first iteration of the band kind of ended and we almost started again, even though we kept the name, we were back to playing to nobody again, like very small rooms. And we'd played gigs like that for 5 years. And then very quickly that we launched that song, Armies Against Me, in Ballarat in December. Again, nothing really happened with it, but then our old manager sent it to, I think it was, we'll send it to Triple J, and it was Richard Kingsmill, but there was also someone else that I'm trying to forget now. I should know this, but someone who really just who was hosted in the Australian Home and Hose show. Gosh, who was it? It's terrible that I've forgotten that, but
It's
might
on the
be
tip of
able
my
to.
tongue as well. Actually, I'm trying to do a
Yeah,
bit of
yeah.
googling while you're talking.
But anyway, I guess that song, and then by February, that song, and basically our manager said, "Hey, you should give this song a try. Like you listen to this song, I think it's something special." And then it did get added in February, and it just took this life on its own. And for a little while there, it just felt, like it was the improbable kind of rock star dream or rock and roll dream where just out of nowhere you're on festival bills and you're selling records. And when that song came out, our distributor said, well, you've charted, it's in the top 100. And it's just, this is an independent EP that we had you're going to have to print some more. Nothing we would have imagined would ever happen to us. And although it didn't sort of go to that real commercial breakthrough, it was a big deal to go from nothing to having, a song be rated high in the hottest 100 and that kind of stuff. So it was awesome. It was great. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, and from my googling, what was it? Was it Robbie Buck that we're thinking of?
Robbie Buck, that's what
Yes.
it was. With my
Yeah.
apologies to Robbie Buck, because he really did champion the band a lot.
Yeah.
But I'm quite old now, Robbie, and the damage has been done. But yes, he really did champion the band and was, he was a lovely guy. So he's a lovely guy, I imagine. So yeah, we were lucky to get that break, and that really took us to that whole national audience, because we grew up listening to Triple J. Like when in my teens, that was where I found new music.
Mm.
And I never actually thought we'd be getting played on that station or in any kind of capacity. And then for it to start happening was something I'm kind of proud of. It was
Yeah.
great. Mm,
Because I mean, yeah, Triple J Airplay was how I discovered the band. But
mm,
actually, one question I wonder if you can actually answer, because like, obviously being a fan of the group. Now, my wife is American, and I years ago gave her a bunch of mix CDs with Australian music when we are in a
mm.
long distance relationship.
Yeah, yeah.
One of those CDs had Armies Against Me on it, and she said, "Oh yeah, I know this song. I think it was played on the radio or something when it came out."
Oh,
Now,
really? Wow.
do you have, I guess, any idea like if there was ever any US like radio play, or it may have been college radio at the very
I
best?
remember hearing. Do you get some play on some college radio? Yeah, just anecdotally, someone I think at our distributor MGM had sent it to some stations. I
Mhm.
don't think it caught on fire, but I think it was played a little bit
Yeah.
around that time. So it's possible. Yeah.
Because it's like to this day, like I think even just last week, it came
Mm.
on like my Spotify shuffle or something,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
she and I just sort of gave each other a knowing look, and we just said we still don't know how you knew this song. Like
yeah.
it's baffling, but
Yeah, it really did have a life of its own, that song, and
yeah.
it was a success never to be repeated, but it was nice when it happened. Yeah.
Well, I mean, despite it being a success that wasn't repeated, there were other albums and songs and all that.
Mm,
I mean across the career, what there were 4 albums, bunch of EPs, singles, and then
mm,
I guess in 2010 we get to the like I guess the unfortunate for fans, the dissolution. So
mm.
I guess to put it bluntly, why did Epicure call it quits then?
Well, the band, we recorded Postcards from a Ghost, our last album, and I really we had put a lot into that. So you have to kind of go back. So the Armies Against Me was a big hit. The album Goodbye Girl did quite well. It had other songs like the Hottest 100. It sold well, and then we went and recorded Main Street, and that was the only time in our lives we had money just sitting there. Like we didn't spend the money. We just had saved it for the next record. We probably didn't have. Um, some of those songs were a bit overlong. Chris Thompson, who produced it, is a wonderful guy, but more known for his live engineering, and he really just records nicely what the band is doing. But we really needed someone who could edit us a little bit, which Cam McKenzie had done on the previous record. And I had a really bad reaction to some of the reviews from Goodbye Girl. Like we got compared to some very commercial corporate rock bands from America that I just in like street press, but I really took it to heart and it's like, I don't really want to be compared to those bands. So the next record, Main Street, I went the other way. It was very kind of that was sad songs because that's what I was going through, but there was also some long songs. It needed a good edit, and that album didn't resonate with our audience, which was people who liked the band liked it, but Triple J, which is sort of they weren't that into it. They played the first single, but not really when we needed it to be played.
I mean, I'll be
Uh,
honest, it's probably my favorite album of Epicure's actually.
yeah, right. So
So
that's
yeah,
that's nice to hear, and I do hear that from people. But it also got some terrible reviews. It got a 2-star review in Rolling Stone magazine, for example, and
what do they
it was
know?
the only time we ever got in there. And at the time, I know, but at the time, like I thought, oh man, that's I'd grown up reading that magazine. It's like we finally got in there, and we're getting slammed. And reading back on that now, I can certainly see why. So anyway, that really kind of ended the momentum we had. But then, so we took our time because we had to. But the next record, we spent 3 years making it. I wanted to be sure that I was really confident of every song on there. Put a lot into it. Again, we released that, and it really did feel back then that the success of our record was going to be predicated on whether Triple J supported it. And I got the feedback basically that they were done with the band. The band hadn't sort of done enough, and that was you'd had your shot, and that was kind of it. So, and it's a hard thing to hear, but that's just kind of what had happened. And I'm not being critical of that at all. Every year there's new bands coming out with new music, and I get there must be like, okay, you've had your chance, and now we're moving on to something else, kind of thing. It wasn't for lack of trying on our part. We were really trying to do everything we could. We were still an independent band, funding everything ourselves, but we're still working day jobs and that kind of stuff. So that record came out, didn't get picked up by Triple J. Our manager at the time, I think, had spent a lot of money trying to he thought it was a great record. It was getting great reviews, Postcards from a Ghost, the opposite to Main Street. It was getting great reviews, but we weren't getting kind of commercial radio crossover, which we'd never really had, but that's what we're pushing for with this record. Basically, the album is a commercial failure. And at that point, band members leave the band, you know what I mean? So myself and Dom and Tim are still in it, but we had a great guitarist who got a better offer from another band. We couldn't pay him the same amount. He left. We're still friends, no hard feelings at all, but just the reality of that. Our keyboardist, Heath, who had been, one of my closest friends, was starting a young family and just sort of said, look, I'm out kind of thing. I think once the writing was on the wall, people were leaving. And the reality was we were left with a large amount of debt to our manager at the time, who was, I guess, trying to buy its way into success. You know what I mean? Like it might be huge billboard posters or stuff, but stuff that it was spending that was happening without us knowing about it really. And we really just handed a bill when he left us, you know what I mean? This huge bill that we couldn't pay. we were all working minimum wage jobs. Like we were like, so basically that was the situation we were in, and we were just given this sort of bill for a whole lot of money. And people had stopped coming to shows. That was the other thing. So all the kind of momentum we had, we used to sell out multiple shows at a local venue. We were doing shows to like 50 people. So then our old manager, who was the manager who had kind of suggested that Armies Against Me to Triple J at the time, I told him about the predicament, and he came back on board, and we basically were going to do a farewell tour. You know what I mean? Do an anthology CD. And that was really to pay back the money we owed to our other manager, because we were getting like, letters for, you owe me 40 grand, but we don't have, kind of thing. So we ended the band to try and pay this money back. And then, of course, when the band's ending, then all of a sudden there was a bit more interest again. So people were coming to shows, and we had, we kind of, we'd been a bit sort of bruised and battered by band turnover, the music not being successful in commercial terms, and I guess a management dispute, which doesn't matter now, but that was the way we kind of got cornered into be like, okay, it's too hard, it stopped being fun a long time ago, and I was pretty relieved when it ended, but sad because it'd been our lives for so long. So I'm talking a lot, with my apologies, but like,
no, by all means,
that was why it's nice coming back to it now with that stuff not hanging over our heads. So
yeah. So, because obviously after the band comes to its, I guess, unheralded end, we then see yourself doing some solo work and everything. So, I mean, how did that sort of feel for yourself to actually go into this sort of new mindset of making music, but on your own terms, basically?
Well, I really have my solo records is my favorite music that I've ever made, and the first one was like, I think I wanted to start from scratch and never play Epicure songs live or anything like that, which was kind of stupid because I didn't have enough new songs to really play a set of good stuff. But through that, I met a guy called Dave Manton, who he plays in a solo band. He's actually going to be playing with Epicure when we reunite. But he was a great, incredible mixer, great live engineer. He'd mixed records with Jen Clower, a number of other people. I met Dave through my friend Steve, who plays a band called The Hello Morning. And Steve said, hey, you should meet Dave. I think you guys would really work well together. So I basically did that first solo record with Dave and a couple other friends. Dave's still a really great friend, and we had similar taste in music. So the first solo record, very stripped back. I didn't really have a band behind me. Some accompaniment, but not that much. I did that again, not much kind of success with it. Got played a little bit on radio and stuff. And I kind of stopped for a little while, and then still writing, but just sort of, okay, maybe this is it. I've done 4 Epicure records, I've done a solo record. But then I still had sort of song ideas I liked, and I finally got a second one out in 2000. And Resentment Central came out when did that come out?
2022 or something, was it?
2022, yeah. And that stage, I felt like, and to me, that's my favorite record I've ever made. To me, like, again, it was probably the least heard thing I've ever done, but I thought, okay, that's the record I always wanted to make.
Yeah.
And I just got on a bit of a roll, and the next one came around quickly enough, and then the songs always dictate it. So if I have songs that I like that I want to record, then that kind of pushes it forward. If it falls in a slump, it might be because there isn't any new material there that I think is good. So anyway, with the Epicure stuff, like because I felt like those solo records were the best stuff I'd done, it felt weird that Epicure, which was much more successful, I don't want to diminish how important that music might be to people who enjoyed it, because that means a lot to me, obviously. But I don't think that's my best work at all. Do you know what I mean? So I felt like I'd gotten better at songwriting, and I wanted to do that with Epicure and with Dom and Tim, taking everything I learned from my solo records. I can self-edit now, all those things that I couldn't really do when I was 25.
Yeah, of course.
I wanted to go back and make a record that I was proud of with Epicure, which is what, led to Evenings in Honduras, the new record.
Because I definitely have to say, I did not expect to be seeing an email in my inbox earlier this year saying like, "Oh, hey, Juan here, we've got new music from Epicure," and I was thinking, "Holy shit, that's very surprising." But I mean, how did it feel for yourself to go back into the world of recording music for Epicure? Because obviously, there is the fact that the group ended. I guess from an outward point of view, it feels like it ended quite cleanly because obviously you guys are able to go out what looks like your own terms, basically. And then obviously there is, you're doing your solo work. And it's always one of those things where I feel like a lot of people could be thinking like, okay, if you have a reunion, it better be good because they've got years sort of wondering what could have been. So was there any fear that, getting together, putting new music out under that name might not live up to those expectations?
I mean, not really, just because as I was finishing my last solo record, I'd started jamming with Dom and Tim on new songs I had. So we'd probably jammed up 20 songs, and like they weren't on board initially with getting the band back together. They're all, I had to do a bit of convincing.
Yeah.
But I felt the songs were strong. They were into the song, sorry. And what Epicure, like, I've been the main sort of songwriter in the band, but it's those guys and their reactions to the ideas I show them really forms what the album becomes. Like the songs that resonate with them are the ones I tend to pursue. Do you know what I mean? So if they get a vibe off it, it's like, okay, we're going to work on this song. So they really strongly affect what becomes Epicure. And when they play in it, to me, there's a discernible difference between my solo stuff and Epicure, even though they're written the same way, me just writing the song on the guitar.
Yeah, right.
So I guess I felt, had I not done these songs or new songs with Epicure, I would have done another solo record. I won't stop doing that until I'm kind of out of songs. But I guess I trusted that they said, no, we think these songs are good and we're going to do it together and do it, even if it's just one last time. So they played a big role in me feeling confident that, we're not embarrassing ourselves with, new material.
Yeah, because I mean, it's I feel like the last thing you want is to go to all the trouble, then have someone say, "Ugh, why'd you do that?" Like,
yeah, and look, it could still happen. The people have only heard a few songs, so I don't know. They might hear the new record, it might be like that. But I guess for me, this is my favorite Epicure record, and I guess at some point you have to be a little bit selfish about it. But
yeah.
All the feedback I've had has been pretty good so far. So
Well, get ready for more good feedback because the record is stunning. Honestly, like actually, I should say for anyone, if anyone listening, it's called Evenings in Honduras. It's out, I guess, due to the magic of podcast editing, it's out today,
yeah,
and it's wonderful. You must be feeling great. But it's this record, but it ebbs and flows between that sort of gorgeous, heartfelt sound that Epicure were known for, and like this thing. So it's tracks like Not Okay, Is There Any Way Out Now, and Wait You Out, which I think is a massive standout for myself. And then that one's right next to the surprisingly upbeat, Jackboot Snap. And I swear everyone's working with Queenie lately. It's great to see. She's an amazing musician.
She is, incredible.
I was actually saying on the podcast only, I recorded it 2 weeks ago, it came out last week. I was recently in a music video with Queenie and she was dressed as a prawn. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing to see.
I think I've seen that video actually. I didn't realize you're in that. That's
It's amazing to see what she's when she's not dressed as a prawn, the amazing music she's making. It's not all about her because I guess I should sort of be asking, like, when you were sort of going into making this record. Obviously, you're sort of starting with the idea of it being a solo record, but then basically saying to the guys, "Hey, what do we reckon if this is an Epicure record?" Like, was there ever any sort of particular plan as to what you wanted this record to be sounding like, or was there any plan, or is it just a case of, "Hey, I'm going to make music the only way I know how," and this is what came out?
I think there was, so the last solo record I did, I brought in a lot of people on the record. So Daisy Kilborn sang a couple of songs on that record and took a lead vocal on one of them. And that was basically because I'm a huge fan of Daisy's, but I've also gotten a bit sick of hearing my own voice, honestly, but I kind of like writing the songs. So I tried to, use different, instruments I haven't played with before and all that sort of stuff. So very collaborative with all these other amazing musicians that I've become friends with. And I guess I've brought that into this new record a little bit. So Queenie sings, amazing main vocal. Daisy does some singing. Sam Boone, who did the brass arrangements for Jackboot Snap. I guess I'm still trying to do something that I like and that I'm into, and I like those musicians I love, and you always feel like you want to take it further than you have before. So I guess that was the mentality I took into it, but it still has to be. Something like Jackboot Snap doesn't sound like anything Epicure's done before.
It definitely took me by surprise while listening to it, but it's one of those things where you listen to it and you're just like, actually, it sounds different, but it sounds right. And I think that's the important thing.
Yeah, well, that's good to hear because there is some stuff there that I wonder might be a bit alienating for people. But then, I guess, like I said, all those songs have basically just started with me on a guitar singing them, kind of thing. So I hope there's some connective tissue to the old stuff. And even like on this record, I play most of the guitar. Our old guitarist Dan actually really sadly passed away suddenly not long ago, which has been pretty hard for everybody. And he sort of briefly rejoined the band, but had a long time of he had some struggles with mental health and that kind of stuff. And he'd sort of briefly joined the band when we were working this new record, and then just said he couldn't do it. He couldn't sort of do that. But he was a big influence on me as a guitarist. So even the guitar stuff I'm playing, to me, I'm like, okay, what would Dan do in this situation? Like, I'm not really a lead guitarist, but so to me, I can hear him in the little bits I'm playing. Or, and all the other people, like Heath, who's a really good friend of mine as well, who was also in the band, didn't want to do this one for reasons he's never told me. I don't know why he doesn't want to do it. We're still good friends. But so when I'm hearing Keith's stuff, I'm thinking, okay, what would Heath do? So I feel like they're kind of there anyway in that kind of capacity. I can't remember what your question is now, Tyler. I'm sorry, I've kind of gone off on the
No,
tangent.
I was pretty much asking if there was a particular plan in going into this at all.
Yeah,
And
not really. Other than I want it to be good, and I wanted it to be, I want it to be good songwriting. Like I that's what I take pride in. I want people to listen to it and go, wow, these are great songs.
yeah.
I don't know if it's ever happened yet, but I hope that one day that'll happen.
Well, I mean, again, I was listening to it today, and it was
Mm.
one of those things where, like, I can always sort of tell it's a good album when I listen to it, and I just instantly say, I have to listen to that song again because,
Yeah,
like, I mean, I think this year I'm on track to listen to about 1,000 records because I put them down in a
yeah,
spreadsheet, I rate them and everything. This one was rated quite
yeah. Wow.
highly, but it
Yeah,
was the sort of thing where the second I like finished a couple of songs, I'm like, no, I need to like write them down to go back to them afterwards once I've finished actually ingesting the whole record.
yeah.
And yeah, it's a really stunning piece of work that you should definitely be proud of. I can say that for sure.
Thank you, mate. That's very kind.
But
Thanks.
I guess one question I always love to ask folks who do release new records is like, what does an album like this say about who Epicure is in 2026?
Well, I mean, I haven't really written politically before. Like a lot of it's just been fairly inward focusing, and but certainly I've become a little bit more, you know, that stuff is sort of looming large in my mind as it is for a lot of people. I know just what's going on in the world. So Jackboot Snap is about the ice raids in the US and how awful all that is. Not okay is about this kind of state of the lyric is the villain's always winning, which is kind of feels like that kind of billionaire class. So there's several songs like that that are more very much what's happening in the world right now. So with Evenings in Honduras, I like that the title has this kind of almost last days of Rome quality to it because that does feel like what we're living through, which is unsettling, but that's that I guess looming large in my mind. And then I don't know if I've told you this, but Evenings in Honduras was a conversation I overheard with Dom and Tim when we started rehearsing. And it was the three of us just getting back together as friends, hang out. We were having a whiskey while writing some new songs. And Dom and Tim are really quite close friends. We are all good friends, but I feel like they have a particularly close friendship. They've holidayed together, all that kind of stuff. And I just overheard them talking about the evenings in Honduras, just like the evenings Honduras. And it was just this moment of them kind of sharing this really nice kind of moment. So for me, the title reflects, the places where we've been that we wish we could go back to, but never can, where we are now. The friendships that pass and go and endure, the people who make it and the people who don't, just like our friend Dan, just like we all inevitably don't make it. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of that kind of state of the world stuff, but also, it's a record I couldn't write at 25 because, you probably don't feel those things when you're 25. You feel them when you're 47, which is how old I am now. You start to, the passing of time seems to go quickly and you lose people. And, it's not a great headspace to be in, but just the one you're in. And, it's always, songs are always a great way to kind of express that, because otherwise, where else do you kind of put it?
Yeah.
And for me, that's always where I've kind of put that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's completely fair. And
Mm.
it's definitely a very sort of I mean, just when you sort of say like there's those sort of political aspects to it. Yeah, it's a sort of thing. I'm not thinking back now, and I'm like, yeah, that line's taking on a different sort of view when I sort of view it through that lens and everything like that. But
Yeah.
no, it is truly a great record, and obviously you're also playing it live. There's a few live shows on the way as well. So I guess how's it feeling to be getting back out there properly with the band?
Yeah, great. Yeah, so we're launching it at Her Majesty's Theatre in Ballarat, which is a beautiful old theatre in Ballarat. And we're gonna like Queenie's gonna come and sing a song. Daisy's gonna be there. Cam McKenzie, who produced a lot of our records and produced this one, he plays with he's famous for being in Horsehead, but also plays in Mark Seymour's band. He's going to get up and play guitar with us. My friend Dave Mann, Steve Veal, like just really trying to put on a really special show for that Her Mad show. And then, Epicure had so much meaning because of all the friends we made around the country, which we made from, people hearing us on Triple J, but like we became friends with a lot of those people, in town like Sydney and Adelaide. And I'm really excited to kind of do that one more time, go out to those places that, really gave the band life. We were really lucky to have people come to our shows and like our music and have it. I've played at people's weddings and their funerals and everything in between. I guess the meaning the music is the meaning people give it. People who connect with it in some way, and they don't have to like everything and they won't like everything. But we were really lucky to have that because not every band gets that. Not every band gets to go around the country and meet new people who like their music, and that was one of the kind of things that's why I wanted to do another tour because it's it's risky. It's cheap. No, it's not cheap.
Not cheap, yeah.
All those sort of things. But to sort of get around the country and see those people that really gave the band, its life is something I want to do one more time at least. So yeah, looking forward to it.
And I guess like you was, I guess sort of like touching on it just there with that the last little line. But I guess what does the future hold for Epicure? Is it too early to sort of tell, or is it a case of see how everything goes, or is it pretty much a case of look, enjoy the record, catch them while you can. Who knows what the future holds?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, like I think it'll depend how these shows go. Like the Ballarat show's almost already sold out, which is awesome. But getting around the country was a little bit different. So again, like we're an independent band, and at this stage, I'm funding everything. So if we get around to these dates around the country, and there's 100 people in the room, then we can keep doing it. If there's like 50, then we can't. So it's kind of just the equation of it. And I will keep making records, and I will keep writing songs. I don't think Epicure will finish though at the end of this tour. I think we'll just keep it as an ongoing thing. We'll just see how we feel about it. Maybe we rest it for another 6 months and go again, or maybe we don't. But I don't think we'll end it the way we did last time. But certainly if you want to see the band, please come out on their shows because it's there's none planned after that. Yep.
Yeah, no, it's completely fair.
Mm.
Well, I feel like I should get down to the portion of the podcast in which its namesake is derived. So, Trusty Chords sees me follow the 1, 3, and 5 structure of standard chord. So, I ask about one artist that's been impactful, 3 albums that have been influential, and 5 songs you can always turn to. And as I always say, it's a long explanation. One day I'll get it down to an elevator pitch, but today's not that day. So, I guess my first question for you here, mate, who is the one artist that's inspired you the most, whether it be personally or creatively?
Well, this is hard, but they're all hard. But like, I think like I really get into the songwriting part of it. So for me, the greatest songwriter ever is Paul Simon. I guess I grew up listening to Simon and Garfunkel and didn't really discover his solo material until I was in my mid-30s, which I just was working in a record shop at the time, and there was some Graceland 30-year edition or whatever came out, and someone put it on. I was like, what the fuck is this? This is amazing. So I really kind of discovered his solo music then. But just as a songwriter, I think the melodies are so beautiful. He's done so many different things. The lyrics are so great. I also kind of feel like maybe he has a slightly more passive voice, which I kind of relate to a little bit. Do you know what I mean? I've been told that about my singing. So, um, you probably can't hear it in anything I do at all. But for me, if I had to pick one songwriter that I admire the most or that I like, or I see as being the absolute best, would be him. Yep.
Yeah, because he's definitely one of those artists who I feel like every couple of years I just rediscover, and it's almost like
Yeah.
every time I'll rediscover that there's like a whole cache of music of his that I just overlooked, and I'm like, wow, this guy he's got, I guess, to use the to make myself sound really old and to use the parlance of the youth, he's got banger after banger, and they're all
Yeah.
great. There's
Incredibly
nary a
musical.
miss in his discography.
That's right. And that's hard to do.
So I guess my next question for you here would be, what are the 3 albums that have impacted you the most? This could be albums that you're always throwing on or things integral to the musical evolution in some way.
Yeah. Well, look, you mentioned the Dead Salesman earlier. And I mean, it was like I said, it was so important for us to see a band like that in our hometown writing such great songs. So the first record of theirs I heard was Jealousy, which a friend of mine gave me to listen to when I was like, 17. And that record is just like, it's just so good. The lyrics are amazing. Hap Hayward is a friend of ours, and I think they're incredible songs. I saw them play so many times back then. They're sort of very much part of, kind of our youth and growing up here. To me, like criminally underrated band. It's probably not the right use of word, choice of words, because they're clearly very revered. But if the Dead Salesmen were in the US, they could have been like the Replacements, were again another kind of band that probably people say underachieved, but like if things had gone their way, they could have been, I don't know, like REM, or they were that good, but just things didn't kind of go their way. So for me, it's a real comfort record and one that was important, I think, for all of us.
They were a band who I only actually discovered through Epicure. Actually, it was actually through the cover that you guys did of Bluestoned back in the day.
Wow, that's amazing.
To this day is actually still one of my favorite covers of anything I've ever heard. That is,
Wow.
it's truly a wonderful cover, and it's such a wonderful song as well. Just a testament to their musicianship. It's brilliant.
Incredible songwriters. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. And what would the next album be?
Next one, oh gosh, I've got Automatic for the People from REM, I guess, by REM. Yep. So for me, that's like, again, it came out, I think, in 91. I would have been like 12, just kind of coming out the right time. Again, beautiful songs of kind of meaning and I guess substance, but, that Michael Stipe's a vocalist that I think I certainly tried to emulate. Like I love the way his voice sounds, so musical. it takes you somewhere, that record. You can put it on now, and that could have come out last week, or when it did. It's sort of a timeless kind of record. I think I talked earlier about being compared to like really commercial kind of American rock bands. There's a pretty fine line between REM and say, I don't want to like diss anyone, but like another band that it's a fine line, but they fall on that line of just being really cool. So yeah, I still listen to Automatic for the People all the time.
It's honestly probably one of my favorite records as well. It's so good. Like again, it's hard to find a fault with that record. I think I mean I think if I had to try, I'd probably think what Star Me Kitten or something. But even then, that's still great. Like
Yeah, there's something about
if
the
that's the
atmosphere.
worst, they're
Yeah,
doing pretty good.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And like I love so many of the records, but that one came at that time when you're just sort of starting to really understand music and stuff. So,
absolutely.
and then if I was going for a third one, talking about Paul Simon, it's a guilty pleasure, but One Trick Pony was, I don't know if you've ever seen that. It was a movie he made in like 1980, I think.
I've heard of it, but never seen it. Yeah.
And it's the soundtrack to that movie. And I think the movie was, a critical failure and got kind of panned, but it's just like a guilty pleasure where it's filmed in that period of late 70s, early 80s, New York, America. It looks incredible. The songs are actually amazing. Like that, they're such great songs. And it's a bit of a comfort record for me. But again, something that you don't really hear people talk about in his sort of back catalogue. I think maybe because the movie didn't do that well, but I love that record.
Yeah, it's one of those sliding doors things. Like just imagine how that movie would be, considered had had it been a little bit better, I guess, or
Yeah.
in the critical mindset, not in terms of quality, because obviously I was like it. And I guess my last question here, I'd love to know the 5 songs that you could always turn to, whether it be for comfort, for excitement, anything at all, your 5 trusty songs.
Cool. So there was a band I loved as a teenager called Blind Melon. If you probably heard of Blind Melon, famous for No Rain, but there's a song on that first record called Sleepy House. To me, I just love that song. It really represents our kind of group of friends. We started hanging out around that time. We'd stay at each other's houses, just have, roam around the neighborhood kind of thing. But Sleepy House to me kind of really reminds me of that time. Beautiful melodies. Again, I kind of related to that voice because I might have wanted to be able to sing like Chris Cornell or Eddie Vedder, but I sounded a bit more like Shannon Hoon. So I kind of, someone with a kind of high, timbre in their voice. Sleepy House, I just think is such a beautiful melody. The lyrics are really nice too. They kind of got this kind of, communal friendship kind of feeling to them. And I love that kind of, it's not sitar at the start, it's something else, but it has this kind of exotic kind of flavor to it, which I think is really cool.
It is also actually really nice to hear, I guess artists like Blind Melon being picked on a podcast like this and not having it be No Rain. Because, I mean, No Rain's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's one of those things where it's like, to actually go deeper into that discography and discover these sort of like hidden gems that a lot of people don't know. That's something I really love because I am aware of the song. For the life of me, I couldn't hum a bar of it. So I'm excited to actually go back and rediscover.
Yeah, check it out. Yeah, great lyrics. The lyric is there's no time frame for what I need to do today in the Sleepy House. It's like it's a nice sentiment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what would song number 2 be?
Love Joni Mitchell. So she's got a song called Last Time I Saw Richard. You familiar with that song? It's on the Blue record.
I am indeed, yeah.
I know it's a famous song, but I just love the lyrics of that. I love the piano melody. It's so melancholy. And when I look at my favorite kind of, I talk about Paul Simon. I also kind of got really into Bruce Springsteen last 10 years. Joni Mitchell's another one where just, incredible discography, love her lyrics, love her voice, like the absolute greats, one of the absolute greats. And I just love that. That whole record's obviously classic, but something about that song, the imagery in the lyrics, I think are incredible.
Actually, a couple of months ago, I was on ABC Evenings with David Astle in Victoria, and I was chatting to him on the air, and it was just after I'd had the 100th episode of this podcast, and he was like, "Oh, what's been the most picked song?" And I was like, "Well, it's actually a Joni Mitchell song, but it's a River, and I think that one's been picked the most." And like it's always great to hear Joni Mitchell mentioned, but it's also nice to hear a song that's not a River, because that song does get picked a little bit, and nothing wrong with the song, but it's she's got such a rich discography, and it's great to hear these other songs being chosen as well.
Yeah, and I think I ripped off a lyric of that. There's she says all good dreamers pass this way in that song, and that's the song, and that's the lyric in Is There Any Way Out Now. So I like you rip off the greats, right? So I totally, and I didn't realize I've done it, but that's where I've got that, obviously. Yeah.
Well, if our lawyers start calling, we can just plead ignorance. I can edit this out of the podcast.
They can have the 20 cents that I've earned from that song if they really want it.
And what do we got next on the list?
I'm a big Billie Holiday fan. I put Billie Holiday on a lot just for like when I'm, I want to just like not think about, just kind of feel nice. She's got a song called I Can't Believe You're in Love with Me, which features Teddy Wilson on the piano. Again, just there's something about that has personal significance for me and my partner. Like we both love that song, and just beautiful voice, and just takes you somewhere. All her stuff is incredible. I guess that's about all I can say. But just beautiful voice. Yeah.
I mean, she's was an absolutely stunning musician. I mean, such an intoxicating voice. It's just a truly great musician, and which is what we're here to discuss, I guess. So we're in good company. What would the penultimate one be? Number 4.
What else have I got? A song that I kind of only listened to recently. So it's Songs O Higher, which was, I guess, I think it's Jason Molina was his name, from Magnolia Electric Company, but that Farewell Transmission song, I'm sure you're familiar with that. But I introduced that Dave Manton, my friend, he hadn't heard any of those records, and I showed him some of their stuff about 10 years ago, but I hadn't heard this song, and then he really got into it, and then he plays a cover of this song, which is just like absolutely mind-blowing. So I introduced him to this artist, but hadn't heard this song, and then I heard him play it, and I was just like, man, that is just such a brilliant track. Like, great lyrics, great, I don't know, just like haunting, and just like, that song to me now, wherever I hear it, is just like, I think one of the best songs ever written, honestly.
It's truly a great song. I don't remember when I first heard it. It was years ago, but for the life of me, I think someone actually may have mentioned this song on here a few months ago, and I think I said at the time, I still have not actually gone any deeper into the Magnolia Electric Co. discography or anything like that, or Songs Are Higher or anything. But at the same time, I'm still very, I'm lamenting the fact that Jason Molina is no longer with us, because I'm like, if he was putting out songs like that, and it's very weird, because I'm like, he was putting out songs like that, and we're not getting anything else. But I'm in that grateful position where I can actually go back and listen to new stuff, because I haven't gone into the discography properly. It's a very weird position to be in now that I'm trying to put it into words, but this isn't about me. But we have one song left. What would that one be for you?
Look, I was a bit kind of conflicted about this, and it's hard to write a list, because I know this artist is obviously very problematic, but I guess I became very enamored with the whole alt country scene in that early 2000 periods, and again through my friend Dan, and we were listening to so much Gilling Welsh, Dave Rawlings, and Whiskey Town, that Pneumonia record. So I'm talking about Ryan Adams, obviously. So again, there's no condoning any of his kind of behavioural stuff at all, but he's certainly been an influence on me as a songwriter. I do find it hard to listen to that music now, but that Jacksonville Skyline song from that Whiskey Town record, to me, that was the first thing I kind of heard almost in that genre. It was I was just like, from that moment, it really affected the way I wrote songs. Like, I feel like everything is kind of a pale imitation of that kind of sound. Not everything, but, it really affected me as a songwriter. So I've got to acknowledge how problematic that is. But as a songwriter, some amazing songs.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's always really hard to actually sort of like express fondness for musicians like that when they have had a problematic past. That said, I've had so many people mention Kanye West songs, which I guess as time has gone on, he's become even more problematic. So it's probably need a few disclaimers. But I mean, Ryan Adams may have had his issues, but he certainly knows his way around a song. You can't deny that.
I couldn't think of, for that generation, I can't think of anyone who's written better songs and more of them, so that's, I guess, that thing. If you can can you separate artists from their art? If you can, then those songs are pretty spectacular. But with a asterisk, I guess.
Absolutely, it's definitely one of those things where if there's ever any of those sort of artists, I tend to prefer to put the CD on rather than put on like streaming services, because it's a small thing, but I'd rather not give them my fractions of a cent or something like that.
No, and look, there's clearly like mental health issues there, and you know what I mean. Like it's I don't think it's a cut and dry thing, but certainly like behaviourally, no excuses. But Jacksonville Skyline, if I still hear that now, I just think, man, it just takes you somewhere. Really beautiful music.
Absolutely. Well, those are some truly wonderful choices, and I feel like this is the place where I should probably say, Juan, Alban, I want to say thank you so very much for your time today and for being part of the Trusty Chords podcast as well.
Mate, thank you for listening to me ramble on about music. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
This whole podcast is about rambling on about music. You're in the right place.
That's very kind. Thanks, Tyler.
Thank you for listening to Trusty Chords. If you listened to this episode and enjoyed it, I'd really appreciate it if you were able to take a few moments to like, follow, share, and review this podcast on your preferred platform of choice. As always, there is no obligation to do so, but considering it helps the podcast's reach, I am forever grateful if you do. As always, I'm over on Instagram and Facebook at Trusty Chords Podcast, all one word. I've also got the blog on my website, which is tylerjenke.com. That's tylerjenke/Trusty Chords Podcast, all one word. That's where you can find a list of all the songs chosen by my guests each week, along with a playlist of all the songs chosen thus far. You can also find a link to the Buy Me a Coffee platform, where you can throw me a few dollars to keep this podcast running if you feel so inclined. I also need to thank Juan for spending his time with me this week for the podcast, and to the person who is deciding to mow right outside of my window. That's really helpful when I'm trying to record. Thankfully, the magic of podcast editing might make that a non-issue, but if you're where I am right now, it's a little bit frustrating. But once again, thank you kindly for listening, and I hope to see you all again next week as I continue to celebrate music and those that create it.